Do you know much about the Russian BRDM reconnaissance vehicle? I personally didn't, but I found one as a model kit and I've gone deep into its history. It's a quirky little vehicle, and I'm going to talk about the development and the history of that vehicle, and also which kit I am going to build to represent that vehicle in scale. Today, we are talking about one of the most gloriously Soviet things ever to crawl out of the design bureau and into a swamp. So, behold the BRDM-2, or to give its full communist tongue twister name, it's on the screen. That's Russian for Combat Reconnaissance Patrol Vehicle, which is a very long way of saying small armoured box that can swim, shoot, and generally make itself a bit of a nuisance. This boxy thing is the mechanical equivalent of an old miserable uncle who refuses to just die. Built in the old days of the Soviet Union, exported to anyone with a flag and basically a vague sense of anti-Western sentiment, and even today it is still clanking around battlefields in 2026 like a stubborn relative who won't leave the party. By the early 1960s, the Soviets had been using the BRDM-1 for a few years and, surprise, surprise, they discovered it had all the combat effectiveness of a wet paper bag in a thunderstorm. No proper turret, so the poor gunner had to stand up like a meerkat and pray. No nuclear, biological or chemical protection. That is the belief in the politics. Who needs to survive nuclear fallout when you've got glorious socialist optimism? No night vision worth a damn, and the visibility was so bad that it was like basically driving around with its eyes closed. So they did what the Soviets always try to do. They built something new, slightly better, and still fundamentally mad, because the lads at Gorky Plant do love a challenge, and enter the BRDM-2 in 1962. Bigger, boxier, and with all the elegance of a council skip that's been armoured. It had a crew of 4, a driver, commander, gunner, and some poor bugger who was probably just there to make up the numbers. And unlike its predecessor, this one actually had a turret. A tiny conical thing that looked like it was designed by someone who'd only ever seen turrets in blurry photographs. Now let's talk about what makes this thing properly tick the boxes of mechanical madness. First, it's got belly wheels. That's right, 2 pairs of extra wheels that run on chains that the driver can drop like a mechanical bollock to help it cross trenches. It's just absurd. It's like the vehicle equivalent of having training wheels on a tank. Stabilizers. But you know what? It works, sort of. The hull is a big welded steel box with a boat-like nose so it can pretend to be a naval vessel. The engine, a 140 horsepower Gaz 41 V8, pinched from the, I think it's Chaika limousine, the Soviet Rolls Royce for people who really hated freedom. That's mounted in the back. This was very clever. It meant the important bits were protected from enemy fire, and the crew compartment was at the front, getting all the glory. The driver and commander sit up front behind bulletproof glass that can be covered by armoured shutters. When those shutters come down, you feel like you're in a mobile pillbox. There are periscopes everywhere. The commander has 6 of them because apparently he needs to see in every direction except where the enemy actually is. And then there is the amphibious bit. Oh yes, this thing doesn't just cross rivers, it swims. I wouldn't say it performs a front crawl, more of a breaststroke. There's a water jet right at the back with a 4-bladed propeller and a trim board at the front that flips up like a ridiculous metal bib. And what is the top swimming speed? A majestic 10 kilometers an hour. You could probably overtake it in a decent rowing boat, but still, it floats. In a world where most armoured cars sink like bricks, that's got to be worth something. Now it's firepower. The main gun is a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun. That's not a machine gun, that's a cannon that sneers at infantry. It can punch through 20mm of armour at a kilometre and make short work of anything soft and fleshy. Next to it sits a 7.62mm PTK coaxial machine gun for when you want to be slightly less enthusiastic about destruction. The turret is interesting though. It has no roof hatch, which means if things go wrong, the gunner is basically trapped in a metal sardine tin while being shot at. Soviet cost cutting at its finest. It does have its flaws, and a few of them. Now let's not pretend this thing is perfect. It's not. It's Soviet. The crew protection is optimistic. 40mm of steel at best, fine against small arms, less fine against anything with an anti-tank in their name. The tyres aren't armoured at all, so one lucky burst of machine gun fire and you're suddenly a very expensive static pillbox. But the real deal breaker of this awful design, the only way in or out is through those front hatches, right in front of the turret. So if you are bailing out under fire, congratulations, you are running straight into your own guns and the enemy's. It's like designing a submarine with the only exit directly under the propeller. Now, many countries have these little cars. The BRDM-2 served everywhere. It pulled Leonid Brezhnev's coffin through Red Square, which is possibly the most Soviet thing ever to happen. It fought in the Middle East, Africa, the Balkans, and of course, it's been having a miserable time in the Ukraine on both sides. You know, the Poles bought hundreds and actually improved them. Being sensible people who actually like their soldiers, fix this in their modernised versions with side doors and proper escape hatches. The Syrians used them as riot combat vehicles until people started shooting back properly. Even the Taliban have a few, because nothing says we beat the superpowers quite like driving around in a 60-year-old Soviet hand-me-down. Look, the BRDM-2 is not sophisticated, it isn't refined, it doesn't have climate control, heated seats or any of that nonsense. What it does have is character, loads of it. It's tough, it's simple, and it will keep going long after more modern computer-controlled vehicles have had a software update and decided to sulk. It's the automotive equivalent of a Lada Niva that's been given a machine gun and told to invade places. Ugly? Yes. Hilarious? Absolutely. Effective in the right hands? Terrifyingly so. In a world full of stealth tanks and billion-dollar drones, there's something refreshingly honest about a boxy little Soviet scout car that can swim, shoot, and still get stuck in the mud like everything else. So, would I really want to go into a war zone in one? Hell no. Would I love to thrash one about through a frozen forest with a bottle of vodka in the glove box and the turret spinning around like a demented fairground ride? Absolutely. It sounds like fun. It may not be the best, not the worst, just gloriously, unapologetically Russian. But today, we're not talking about driving something ridiculous. We're talking about building a small 1/35th version which you can pick up for around 30 quid. So, in the red corner, weighing in at approximately 124 pieces of injected Russian fury, we have the Zvezda BRDM-2 in 1/35th scale. Kit number 3638. A proper little Soviet armoured scout car that looks like it was designed by someone who had too many vodkas and decided that what the world really needed was a box with wheels and a turret and the ability to swim like a depressed dog. Now, before we get all excited and giddy, let's be clear, this isn't some brand new laser scanned, CAD designed masterpiece, which we all now expect from a modern day kit. Nope. This Zvezda's 2021 release is essentially a rebox of the old Dragon kit from 1991. That's right, it's got history, like a Rover Metro with several previous owners and a suspicious number of welded patches. It was reboxed by DML and even Revell back in 1995, with others following suit, before Zvezda nabbed this tooling and gave us this. Now you can open the lid and there it is, that classic early Soviet charm in its smaller plastic form. The hull is suitably boxy, the boat-like nose is present and correct, and those ridiculous belly wheels, the mechanical equivalent of stabiliser wheels on a child's bike, are all there. So your tiny plastic creation can cross imaginary trenches. The turret sits proudly in the middle like a slightly embarrassed party hat, showing off the 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun that, in this scale, it could take on a battalion of tiny airfix soldiers. There is the coaxial 7.62mm PKT as well, because why have one big gun when you can have two and pretend you're invincible? Now, to be honest, detail-wise, it is adequate. The parts on the sprue are still sharp enough for a Sunday afternoon session on the bench, with sprue cutters, cement and paint. But just don't expect the pin-sharp quality of a modern Tamiya or Border Models scale model kit. You'll find some of those delightful 1990s era ejector pin marks and the occasional soft detail that makes you mutter "close enough" under your breath while reaching for the filler. Looking through those instructions, you will see that the interior is non-existent. No seats, no controls, and you don't get any general impression that there's 4 Soviet soldiers are about to have a very uncomfortable day. No full engine bay here either. You will have to pretend that the Gaz 41 VA is hidden away at the back, protected from both enemy fire and your clumsy modelling skills. Oh, and no clear plastic parts for windows. Just a sheet of clear plastic to cut out and tack inside the frame. Putting this thing together should be mostly straightforward, occasionally frustrating and deeply satisfying when it all comes together. The hull halves mate up reasonably well. The belly wheels and their deployment mechanism look properly fiddly, exactly as they should be, because nothing says authentic Soviet engineering like a mechanism that looks like it was drawn by a committee. The water jet at the back is there in all of its glory, complete with the armoured shutter that makes this thing amphibious. In 1/35 scale, of course, it won't actually float in your bathtub, which is a shame. 4 main wheels come with vinyl tyres and have surprisingly decent tread detail, plus those comedy belly wheels. I think it does show off the centre tyre pressure system looking at the instructions. I assume it is represented, which is the sort of nerdy detail that makes us grown modellers weak at the knees. So what about painting it and weathering this communist skip? This is where I think you can bring this BRDM-2 to life. Soviet green, that slightly sickly green that looks like it was mixed in a bucket behind the Gorky factory. Slap on some paint, give it a proper wash with some darker washes and colours, and then start chipping away and showing rust like it's been driven through every muddy field between Moscow and Kiev. It does have a nice sheet of decals that looks in register and uniform. The schemes, Zvezda give you Soviet Russian and a few Warsaw Pact options. You can go through Brezhnev, funeral procession, Ukrainian mud, filthy monster, or Polish modernised version if you're feeling fancy. Is this the best 1/35 BRDM-2 on the market? No, it really isn't. You can grab Trumpeter's Effort, which is probably sharper in places, but this Dragon Repop kit has some soul. It's honest, it doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. It's proper, no nonsense representation of one of the most gloriously Soviet vehicles ever built. Tough, ugly and amphibious, and slightly comical. For the money, it's got some cracking value. You'll spend a few enjoyable evenings swearing at the tiny parts and inhaling the cement fumes. And at the end, you'll have a little armoured scout car that looks ready to swim a river, cross a trench, and generally annoy NATO forces. So, would I build this? Yes, in a heartbeat. It's on my bench right now. Would I recommend it to a beginner? Probably, as long as they've got a bit of patience and aren't expecting perfection straight from the box. But now it's on my bench. After a good wipe down of IPA, I'm going to spend a few weeks putting this together. But I feel, in a world of over-engineered Chinese armour kits with individual link tracks that drive you to drink fermented potatoes, this Zvezda BRDM-2 is refreshingly straightforward. It's not trying to win any beauty contests. It just wants to be built, painted, and placed on your shelf looking like it's about to invade somewhere inconvenient. And that, my friends, is exactly why this kit is kind of brilliant. Now, time for a bit of serious talk. I understand it's Zvezda. They are a Russian company. I hear they're trying to leave the country to go somewhere else. This kit, again, I will state that it is a rebox from Dragon. And as you know, Dragon have now given their tools up to somebody else to repop. And I am hoping it will be repopped by this new company. Now, Zvezda released this kit 5 years ago, and to my knowledge, they haven't reboxed it since then. So if you see one for sale, it will be probably second-hand or in a model shop that probably purchased this before the war started. But it's up to you to go and check this out. And I understand people's thoughts, with all that's happening in Ukraine. Yes, I understand all that. I'm unboxing and reviewing a kit that has probably been in this country over 5-6 years. Okay, and yes, I bought it from a model show, and I think it was a second-hand kit. So I do ask that you don't levitate hate to me. I don't want you to go talking about, that I'm supporting Russia. I don't believe I am. I did, because as I said, when this all happened, we were friends. Okay. But there are others out there. As I said, you can go on eBay, you can find it in a Dragon reboxing or as DML, or there's Revell. And if you really want to build a BRDM-2, check out the Trumpeter's offering as well. They're around the same price, about £30. Have a look on Amazon or on eBay, or go and ask your local model shop. But as I stress, this kit, I believe, hasn't been sold by Zvezda since the war started. These were produced and sent to Europe way before the war started, and that's my belief, and that's where I stand. Let's not try to make this video political. I'm just showing you a model of a vehicle that is a bit quirky and is not too different to some of the things we've been seeing released recently, like the Ferret Scout car, the Stalwart. These personnel carriers are fun, or the Saracen even that's coming out. But it's Soviet, designed back in the 1960s when there was no Russia, so to speak. And I am doing this video at a bit of a risk of offending, and that is not my intention. I'm doing this to show off a kit that I'm about to build because I like the look of it and I am fascinated by its history. Like you all should be doing when you're building models. Go and research what you're building and learn something. Engage in the history and the reasons behind some of these kits. Okay, I think that's it. If you like the video, click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And if you ring that bell, click all, you'll be notified when I release a new video. To subscribe to this channel is completely free and it really does help the channel grow. Again, in one of the four corners will be a video or a playlist where you can watch other content on my channel. And that's it. See you in the next one.
No, I just wanna say hello.